Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Yang berbahagia Dr. Ahmad Badri Abdullah, the Deputy Chair of International Institute of Advanced Islamic Studies, IAIS Malaysia. Your Excellencies, Honorable Speakers, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the IAIS Boardroom for today's crucial forum entitled Western Imperialism and Its Implication. This timely event is jointly organized and hosted by the International Institute of Advanced Islamic Studies, the Hashim Sani Center for Palestine Studies, and Aliran. Today, we gather to examine the historical roots, contemporary expressions, and global consequences of Western imperialism, with deep-seated legacies affecting regions across Asia, Africa, Latin America, and the Middle East. Our discussions will pay particular focus to the Palestinian issue and the evolving high-stake geopolitical dynamics in the region. So we shall start the event with an opening prayer by Mr. Aiman from Sekolah Merdeka.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجكم. نبدأ بأم الكتاب الفاتحة. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين حمدا يوافي نعمه ويكافئ مزيده. يا ربنا لك الحمد كما ينبغي لجلال وجهك الكريم وعظيم سلطانك. اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد صلاة تنجينا بها من جميع الأهوال والآفات وتقضي لنا بها جميع الحاجات وتطهرنا بها من جميع السيئات وترفعنا بها عندك أعلى الدرجات وتبلغنا بها أقصى الغايات من جميع الخيرات في الحياة وبعد الممات وعلى آله الطاهرين الطيبين آمين.
Thank you, Mr. Aiman, for the dua. Ladies and gentlemen, to officially set the tone for today's discourse, it is my absolute honor to invite Yang Berbahagia Dr. Ahmad Badri Abdullah, Deputy of IAIS, to deliver his opening address. Please welcome him to the stage.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Esteemed guests, ladies and gentlemen, I am actually representing our chairman, Dr. Mazli Malik, to read his message for all of you. Due to some circumstances, especially the development that's happening in Johor right now, our chairman cannot be with us today, but he is sending our regards to all of you. So I think I'll be reading his welcoming remarks to all of you. Distinguished panelists, esteemed ambassadors, respected scholars, colleagues from IAIS, Aliran, and the Hashim Sani Center for Palestinian Studies, ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to welcome all of you to this important and momentous forum on Western imperialism and its implications. We gather today at a moment when the world appears to be standing at a crossroads. We live an age of unprecedented technological advancement, global connectivity, and material prosperity. Yet, we are also witnessing devastating wars, deepening inequalities, the erosion of international norms, and a growing crisis of trust in global institutions. When we speak about imperialism, we are not discussing on a relic of the past. We are discussing on a structure of power that continues to shape political realities, economic engagements, and cultural narrative, and even the way human suffering is recognized or ignored. The late Palestinian intellectual Edward Said reminds us that domination is sustained not only by armies and institution, but also by narrative. And by determining whose voices are heard and whose histories are remembered and whose suffering matters. Today, nowhere is this question more urgent than in the Palestinian territory. For decades, the Palestinian people have endured occupation, dispossession, displacement, and repeated cycles of violence. Yet the Palestinian question is not merely a religion or regional issue. It has become a moral mirror reflecting the contradiction of our international system. If international law is universal, then it must be applied universally. If human rights are universal, they must be defended universally. And the same question emerged in the evolving confrontation involving the United States, Israel, and Iran. Beyond the immediate strategic calculation lies a deeper concern. Whether the world is moving towards a genuinely multipolar order based on justice and mutual respect, or merely witnessing the continuation of power politics under new circumstances. So this forum is not an exercise of anti-Westernism. Indeed, one of the great intellectual tradition of the West itself is the tradition of self-critique. Thinkers such as Bertrand Russell, Noam Chomsky, Howard Zinn, Edward Said, and many others challenge structures of domination and expose the moral inconsistencies of power. Their voices remind us that the pursuit of justice transcends geography, ethnicity, and civilization. The real question here is whether humanity can transcend all forms of domination, whether colonial, economic, militarily, ideological, or technological. As Muslim, we are guided by civilizational vision that places justice at the center of public life. As the Quran commands, "O you who believe, stand firmly for justice and witness as witnesses to God, even if it be against yourself." An-Nisa verse 135. So this principle resonates with universal human aspiration. Every civilization possesses tradition that affirm human dignity, compassion, and freedom. Therefore, while today's discussion will examine the historical and contemporary manifestation of imperialism, I hope we will also move beyond diagnosis towards renewal. So it needs a new moral imagination, an imagination capable of envisioning international relations not only as a contest of domination but as framework for shared human flourishing, and an imagination that prioritizes dialogue over cohesion, cooperation over hegemony, and justice over expediency. On behalf of IAIS Malaysia, I wish to express our sincere appreciation to our partners, the Hashim Sani Center for Palestine Studies and Al-Iran, as well as our distinguished speakers, participants, and whoever who contributed to their expertise and insight to this forum. So I look forward to a robust, thoughtful, and constructive discussion. May our deliberation today contribute not only to deeper understanding but also to the pursuit of a more just and humane world. Thank you very much. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam. Thank you very much, Dr. Ahmad Badri, for that insightful and profound opening address. So now we are moving swiftly to the core of our program. We shall now begin our first panel discussion. The topic is highly compelling: Palestine, Cuba, Iran, unbowed victims of Western imperial anarchy. To guide this conversation, let us welcome our moderator to this session, Mr. Tong Weng Wai from Al-Iran. Along with him, please welcome our esteemed panelists to the stage. Her Excellency Yadira Ledesma Hernandez, the Ambassador of Cuba. I think she will be joining us soon, inshallah. Dr. Habib Riza Arzani, Cultural Counselor at the Embassy of Iran. And Dr. Muslima Imran, Director of Asia Middle East Center for Research and Dialogue. The floor is yours, Mr. Tong.
Thank you, Parvina, and good morning, everyone. The ambassador from Cuba, she is on the way and she will join us in a short while. So, again, good morning, everyone. My name is Tong Weng Wai. I'm a member of Aliran, and as Parvina has said, I'll be the moderator for the first panel this morning. Sharing this space in front this morning with these three, at the moment, two significant individuals from Cuba, Iran, and Palestine makes me think of a powerful proverb that we have in Malaysia, a Malay proverb. Biar putih tulang, jangan putih mata. It is better to die than to live without honor in disgrace. It's a very powerful statement that projects great strength and steadfastness. Cuba, Iran, and Palestine have all been subject to the brunt of Western imperial sanctions, embargoes, assassination attempts that became assassinations, intrigue and sabotage, outright war, violence, and bombings, forced displacement, dispossession, ethnic cleansing, genocide, you name it. In each case, for decades, or in the case of Palestine, for more than 100 years. Yet none of them have bowed to the pressure, none of them bow to the pressure, cruel though it is in extremis. Nothing is perfect, but the fact is they continue to remain steadfast in their resistance, their honor intact, while American, Israeli, and other Western purveyors of violence continue to disgracefully display their barbarity, including those that enable that barbarity, both Western and non-Western alike. You will know from my language, this is not an academic forum. It is not an academic forum taking some kind of neutral position, seeking to dissect both sides of the story. No, it is not that. This is an event in solidarity with people and nations that have been subject to external abuse, bullying, murder, and oppression, but who, in my greatest respect, remain unbowed and who simply refuse to just say, yes, sir. I've got a note here from the MC that says that we are requested to speak from our seats. So I will now migrate. Migrate and give the best possible meaning to occupation on my own seat. So I have here, well, first of all, it would have been Excellency Yadira Hernandez, but I will start with Professor Dr. Habib Reza Arzani. Dr. Habib is a professor, a cultural diplomat and senior academic with extensive leadership experience in cultural policy, interfaith dialogue, religious studies, higher education, and international relations. He is the cultural counselor of the Islamic Republic of Iran in Malaysia, a faculty member of the Iranian Academy of Islamic Culture and Sciences, advisor to the Iranian Minister of Culture and Islamic Guidance, the CEO of the Culture and Art Centers of Iran Mosques, and Director General of Culture and Islamic Guidance for the Isfahan province. Dr. Habib is also the author of more than 80 books and scholarly articles. To my far right, we have Dr. Muslim Imran, whom I'm happy to see again after a while. You might say that Dr. Imran is somewhat a product of Malaysia because after completing his high school in Hebron in Palestine, he spent a number of years studying in Malaysia in IIUM, communications engineering, political science, culminating last year in a PhD in strategic and international studies at University Malaya. Dr. Imran is the founding director of AMEC, the Asia Middle East Center for Research and Dialogue, where he leads initiatives fostering strategic dialogue between Asia and the Middle East. He's also the senior non-resident scholar of the Hashim Sani Center for Palestine Studies at UM, as well as formerly the chairperson and CEO of the Palestinian Cultural Organization in Malaysia. Among other things, he's currently now also a member of the Board of Trustees of the Muslim World Forum for Thought and Civilization, an organization that's led by Tun Dr. Mahathir Mohamad, our former Prime Minister of Malaysia. And of course, he's got a long list as well of publications and research, for which obviously I do not have time to read out. But I will now, without further ado, call upon the person, Dr. Habib, who is closest to my left, to please deliver his remarks, and we shall soon then be joined by Her Excellency, the Ambassador of Cuba. Dr. Habib, please.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulullah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi al-akhyar. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Before I begin my remarks, I would like to express my sincere appreciation to the organizers of this important forum. I extend my deepest gratitude to the International Institute of Advanced Islamic Studies, IAIS Malaysia, the Hashim Sani Center for Palestine Studies, HSCPS, and Aliran for their initiative in convening this timely and intellectually stimulating discussion by bringing together scholars, diplomats, civil society representatives, and members of the media. These esteemed institutions have created a valuable platform for critical reflection on some of the most pressing challenges facing our contemporary world. Such academic engagements are indispensable for fostering mutual understanding, encouraging informed dialogue, and promoting a major, just, and peaceful international order, inshallah. The topic that I'm going to discuss about, I don't know, do we have, oh yes, thank you very much. There's a presentation here. The topic that I have selected for this forum is neo-imperialism and civilizational resistance, and rethinking, this is the subtitle, rethinking the contemporary global order through the lens of Iran's experience, especially nowadays, which is very important for not only for Muslims, but also for the world, because it has a great impact. The resistance of Iran for the world. Distinguished Dr. Muslim Malek. Okay, thank you very much. Dr. Muslim Malek and Dr. Badri, thank you very much. Also, Her Excellency, the Ambassador that is going to, inshallah, join us, and esteemed scholars, Dr. Muslim Imran, and our respected moderator, Dr. Tang Wang. Thank you very much. Our esteemed scholars, distinguished guests, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. It is both honor and a privilege to address this distinguished forum on the theme of Western imperialism and its implications. Of course, we have our respected scholar who is a specialist in imperialism, Professor Farid Al-Attas, who is sitting at the end. And I would like to share some reflections on one of the most pressing issues in contemporary intellectual international relations, the enduring relationship between power, domination, and resistance. Okay. Has imperialism truly ended? This is the question. Most of us maybe think that imperialism belongs to, past time, and we say, Alhamdulillah, we are living in the new world, and there is no imperialism. And even sometimes, if the great scholars are going to discuss about imperialism, we say, okay, are you living in the past? The imperialism has finished. What are you talking about? But this is exactly the question that we are going to go through. Has imperialism truly ended? Following the collapse of classical colonialism and the wave of independence movements across Asia and Africa in the second half of the 20th century, many believe that the age of imperialism had come to the end. Yet, developments over recent decades suggest otherwise. Imperialism has not disappeared, rather it has transformed itself. So we have a new type, a new kind of imperialism. The general question today is no longer whether imperialism exists, but rather how does imperialism operate in the 21st century, and how can nations preserve their independence, dignity, and agency in the face of it? It was very important that right now, our respected moderator mentioned, sometimes we are going to live. It's just living. But sometimes we are going to live as a human being by our dignity. How can we say that just we are living without dignity? Is it a life? Can we call it life? Yeah, of course, we can say that, of course, we are existing, we are living, we are eating, going this side, that side. It's very delicious, that one is very good, it's enjoyable. But how about the human being? We're talking about our respected soul and our respected spirit. The spirit that we are going to have, it's going to be satisfied by dignity. If human being has its own dignity, then we can call it human being. Otherwise, just living like other, creatures of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that they are living. Neo-imperialism, the transformation of domination. Unlike classical imperialism, which relied primarily on territorial occupation, contemporary imperialism functioned through the management of dependencies and asymmetries of power. So just you can look at it as from classical to neo-imperialism, that territorial occupation, yes, mostly, not totally, but mostly it has finished. But dependency management, this is very important. We say that, Alhamdulillah, we are independent. Our country is independent. But how it is independent? Independent by dependency to this and this and this and to this country and that country and to the... So which kind of independency we're talking about? And then we have direct rule and indirect control. Yes, right now there is no direct rule. No one is going to force us. But in hidden, maybe everyone can force us. You should do this and you should do that. What does it mean? Is it not imperialism? It's now I'm going to discuss about the types and kinds of, let me say, imperialism that we have nowadays. its principal dimensions may be identified as follows. One, military imperialism. You know that the continued use of military interventions, proxy wars, foreign military bases, and coercive security arrangement to maintain geopolitical dominance. This is the military imperialism. Economic imperialism. We have also economic, which is very, very important nowadays. The deployment of unilateral sanctions. You know that from the beginning of our revolution, when we say that at almost 47 years back, we say that we are going to have our own independency. We are going to be independent. They say, okay, you can be independent, but we are going to bring sanctions. Why? A nation wants to stand on his feet. Why you are going to stand against them? You cannot, because this is a new imperialism. And according to this, they are going to bring sanctions. And then, you know that international financial systems. You know that even right now, we cannot open our bank account, even in some Muslim countries. It's very difficult. And if you are going to ask them, say, okay, we are with you, our heart is with you, but you know that there is some other pressures for us, and because of that pressure, we have to stand. So what does it mean? It is not imperialism. Currency hegemony and economic pressure as instruments of foreign policy. And you know that when the pressure, economic pressure comes to the nations, then the nation, of course, can tolerate it. But how? For how many years? For us in Iran, we have a great experience that for 47 years, we have tolerated it. But you know that this is not for whole nations. There are many people that it's very, very difficult for them. And then they are going to bring divisions amongst them. Say, okay, why you are going to have this division? This is not because of us. This is because of you. Because you are going to bring, this kind of things among us. And then by your pressures, by the sanctions, you are going to bring pressure for our nation. And then in this case, definitely some of our people, they are going to accept it, and some others, they are not going to accept this. The third one is media and cognitive imperialism, the shaping of public opinion through global media networks, the construction of dominant narratives, and the influence over collective perceptions and political imagination. This is also very important. You know that if you go to Iran, it's almost 2.5 years that I'm here in Malaysia. And let me tell you that I'm not Malaysian, but I'm honored to be here. I told it many times. I've been in 53 countries, but I found Malaysia the best one. The very, very nice people, kind people, the people that they are supporting justice is very important, and even the government. But I'm going to tell you that from Malaysia, we have sent till now many, delegation, they went to Iran from different universities, from different NGOs. When they want to go to Iran, you can ask them, what is your idea and your opinion about Iran? And after coming back, you're going to ask them. You know that from Malaysia, right here in Malaysia, from one of the most important universities of Malaysia, a delegation went to Iran. One of them, when they wanted to go, he went with 10 kg rice. 10 kg rice. Believe me or not, it was just 2 years ago, at the beginning of my arrival. After 3 months, 4 months, they went to Iran. And then when he came back, he said that, Doctor, I'm so sorry. I said, well, I didn't know. I said, because when I wanted to go to Iran, I said that, let me take with myself at least some rice, because maybe I'm not going to find rice in Iran. And what should I do for 10 days in Iran without rice? And then when he wanted to come back, he said that I found everything was there. And how about the sanctions? And whatever, any kind of foods. And not only in Tehran, because they went in Tehran, in Qom, in Mashhad, in Isfahan, at least 4 cities. So I found everywhere, it was whatever that you wanted to find, you can find in Iran. But I'm so sorry, because of my perception about Iran. So this is about what? This is about, this is the narrations. Because nowadays we are talking about, living with narrations. Just we are looking to the news. But reality is something else. Technological imperialism. This is the fourth one. The monopolization of strategic technologies, control over digital infrastructures, and the use of data as a new source of power in the information age. This is also very important. I'm not going to go through because my time is very limited. Epistemic imperialism. This is the fourth one. The privilege of particular systems of knowledge while marginalizing alternative intellectual traditions and non-Western perspectives. As post-colonial scholars have argued, contemporary domination increasingly manifests itself not merely as rule over territories, but as influence over the choices and aspirations and imaginations of societies. These are the types of neo-imperialism. And now let me share with you the experience of Iran, because maybe you want to know more about Iran and Iran's experience from historical memory to strategic independence. Iran's modern history has been profoundly shaped by foreign intervention and struggles for sovereignty. From the concessionary agreements of the 19th century of 1953 coup d'etat against the democratically elected government of Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh. You know that Mohammad Mossadegh, he was not, it was before our revolution. Before our revolution, they decided to stand on their feet in Iran, the nation of Iran. But what happened for them? They encountered with coup d'etat. So it was in 1953. The pursued independence has become deeply embedded in Iran's national consciousness. Oh, really? The time is running out. I didn't know that time is right that. Sorry for that. Yes, I'm going to go on. The principle of independence within the historical context, the Islamic Revolution of 1979 may be understood as an attempt to redefine the relationship between the state, society, and external powers. One of its central aspiration was encapsulated in the principle of independence. Over the subsequent decades, Iran has faced various forms of external pressure, including these are the pressures that we have in these years, in these 47 years after our revolution till now. You see that at the beginning, we have just after less than 2 years, we encounter with an 8-year imposed war. And it was for 8 years. Just imagine that a country, even for a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, it's too much. But imagine that for 8 years after our revolution, we have war. And it was not by Iraq. Everyone knows it was by imperialism. It was by those countries that they want to, because they knew that the time of imperialism has finished. Now they're going to start the new imperialism. How? By bringing divisions. Why we are going to discuss about Shia and Sunni? This does not matter. We have two great, respected scholars and professors from the university, Dr. Al-Lahyari, Dr. Professor Oliai, and Professor Al-Lahyari. They are here. And they came up, it's almost 1 year that I didn't go to Iran, but they came just yesterday from Iran. You can ask them after the meeting that what is the situation in Iran? The people, they are supporting the government. But what happened to us? Through the media, whatever that they want to discuss about it, they're going to tell us. But you can go there And you can see the people that we have. At the beginning, we have 8 years war that it was imposed to us. Extensive economic sanctions from the beginning of our revolution, still now. And now we say, why we are going to continue the sanctions? So, okay, we are going to think about it. And this is not only by one country, by America. No. Many countries are going to support. And political and diplomatic isolation, media campaigns, and cognitive warfare and restrictions on scientific and technological advancement. And then resistance as civilizational ethos, self-determination, dignity, and cultural independence. Just let's go through the slides that we have because the time is running out. So what should we do? We encounter these problems and we have these problems. But what is the solution? The best solution is resistance. Resistance. And fighting for our dignity and cultural independence. This is very important. Resistance and dialogue. Justice, reciprocity, and mutual respect. If we believe that the fundamental of our dialogue is mutual respect. But right now, you know that even right now, after the war that it was imposed, this is the 3rd war that we had. And right now, when they are going to write an MOU, even for signing the MOU, you see that there are many things that they don't accept, that we should have mutual respect. So, okay, we are America, you are Iran. We are America, you are Iran. But it shouldn't be like that. We are living in modern world. How we are going to live in the modern world and we are going to think like imperialism, with the thought and idea of imperialism, and we can say that imperialism has ended? Definitely it has not ended. And I'm going to finish that, my speech by this, poem from Saadi. Saadi was one of the famous, Iranian poems that even if you go to United Nations, you can find in one of the museum of United Nations. It is a carpet that it has been dedicated to them. Just I'm going to end up my, talk with this poem. It said, Bani Adam, let me, recite it in Farsi and at the end, translation. It said, Bani Adam, اعضای یکدیگرند که در آفرینش ز یک گوهرند چو عضوی به درد آورد روزگار دیگر عضوها را نماند قرار. Means that human beings are members of one another. Let me bring it there. Yeah. Human beings are members of one another, created from the same essence and soul. If one member is afflicted with pain, other members uneasy will remain. If we believe that all the people in the world, not Muslim, not Shia, Sunni, no, all the people in the world, if we believe that this is a body and we are one part of that body, then if one part is going to be injured, is going to be suffered, the other parts, they cannot be in ease. So this is the poem from Saadi almost 700 years back. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Habib. It's a pity we didn't have more time given the great topicality of Iran at the moment. But we will still have a few minutes for Q&A in a short while. So let us welcome here Her Excellency Yadira Ledesma Hernandez. Welcome, Your Excellency. And so Her Excellency Yadira is the Cuban ambassador to Malaysia since 2025. She's also the non-resident ambassador to the Republic of the Philippines, as well as designated ambassador to Brunei Darussalam. During her diplomatic career, she has participated in different negotiating processes and international events as part of Cuban delegations, especially on issues related to the United Nations agenda, disarmament, peace and security, human rights, the non-aligned movement, and the community of Latin American and Caribbean states. She did law at the University of Havana in Cuba. And with that, may I invite you to please give your remarks.
Good morning to our colleagues. It's an honor for us being invited to this important forum today. And please accept my apologies because I arrived a little late. And I must explain that because of the lack of difference between Latin American and the Caribbean, when I wake up, I always have many instructions to fulfill. And today it was an urgent note I must send to Wisma Putra. And then it was a misunderstanding on the address. Sorry for that, but it's my pleasure to be with you today and also to address this important topic. The title, Western Imperialism, its implications, is really relevant. And I will share the experience of Cuba, but also from my multilateral experience based on that too. From our view, what we are witnessing is new forms of new colonialism. It has been clear in the experience of my countries and what we have witnessed in the recent years that wherever there are a natural resources or a geopolitical interest behind that, you will find interest and tools of geopolitical nature that will be applied. Today, countries that have, for example, rare minerals or water will be a target. And this is why it's important, these collective reflections on different experience. And I really appreciate our colleague from Iran, their views. In our case, one of the main issues today is the role of media. And it has been also instrumental against our country. And I will address that point later. But just to explain a little on our experience, let me see if I can manage this. Oh, no. Okay. Okay. Well, we have a previous experience during colonial times. Spain was our metropolis. And then when the Cuban soldiers almost win the independence war, the Americans intervene. They explode their own vessel in our harbor to use as excuse to intervene in the war. And then after that, all the treaties were signed. They were in the control of Florida, Philippines, Cuba, etc. Then we inherit neocolonialism. It was in a so huge exploitation of workers, just to summarize our history, that this is why the Cuban Revolution started and triumphed. In 1959 was the triumph of the Cuban Revolution. Imagine, the country was mainly in the hands of all American companies. This is why we need to make a nationalization process, very legal base. But the only that didn't accept compensations were the Americans. All the European companies, etc., they accept compensations. Then what it means is that there are a sentiment that the revolution took the properties. But the revolution precisely triumphed because it was that huge exploitation of workers, that poverty at that time, that generation start a new revolutionary process. Also, just to summarize, that revolutionary process achieved many goals. Only in 2 years after the triumph of revolution, we achieved the first territory in Latin America free of illiteracy. After that, some indicators were like the developed country were achieved by Cuba. We have a free and universal access for healthcare and education. I am a master and I've never paid for my education. And this is what my generation inherited. A country with many social benefits because we developed a socialist revolution. Then that level of poverty that my grandparents and my parent explained me, it was like a history for me. But those goals that the revolutionary process achieved today are really at risk because we has been under a comprehensive system of sanctions. It was clear since 1960 that they identified that the Cuban revolutionary process has the support of the population, but they need to try to imply those economic tools to try to the living conditions deteriorated. And then this is why Kennedy start with this system of sanctions that we call it a blockade. It has been a financial, economic, and commercial blockade, but nowadays it's also a blockade of oil. There are different US administrations that have applied different laws against Cuba. And for us, this is more or less like the core of the policies and hostilities against Cuba: economic blockade, disinformation campaigns, and political subversion. And for that, they has, of course, implement legislative support, policies, and special plans for Cuba. Every administration has adopted special plans for us. And of course, the Department of Treasury has a tremendous role in the implementation of this coercive sanction that is the more comprehensive and prolonged system of unilateral coercive measure implied against an entire nation. One of the problems that is not only against Cuba, because there are extraterritorial nature of that blockade. And after the example of Cuba, we have seen other countries like Iran that has received this assistance of sanctions because it's crucial. You cannot develop a social program, etc., if you don't have an economy to support that. This is why this is the target. And then you can read all our prohibitions or our obstacles to develop a normal life in our country. And don't forget that US and Cuba are neighbors. We are our respective normal markets for trade. Then it's really difficult. And there are historical relations. I can tell you that with the people of United States, we have very close relations. There are a lot of solidarity with Cuba. The problem has been US administrations. The scope of the sanctions are incredible. And this undermines the sovereign right of many countries. Because why we need to accept that a power says, no, you are not allowed to sell oil to Cuba. Because if you do that, I will imply you tariff. Why we need to accept that reality? Why multilateralism in United Nations was created? Okay, was created precisely to find collective solutions for global problems and to use the dialogue, the peaceful settlement of disputes as tools to avoid war. But nowadays, this international order and all those principles and rules are violated. And we are listening new narrative against saying that a new rule-based order, etc. What new rule-based order? We already have this structure of the principles of the United Nations, the international law. The problem has been the violations. The problem has been when they withdraw from international commitments like the nuclear agreement on Iran that they agree and then they withdraw. This is the real problem. We don't need a new rule-based order. We need to improve the international order to less discrimination, equal opportunity. But this is why it is important, the role of media. Well, a lot of obstacle prohibitions you can see there. It's a really comprehensive system of sanctions and with no international background jurisdiction. It's just unilateral actions, but with implication for many countries. Those are some figures that explains itself the impact for the small economy, the economy of an island, my country. Imagine how to survive with this negative impact for the economy. I believe you are aware that Cuba also has promoted a lot of international cooperation, in particular in the field of health, even education. Well, this international cooperation is also under the campaigns based on lies. We, for example, in the case of Palestine, that Cuba firmly support the cause of Palestine, we has provided vaccine for Palestine. In Cuba, we has offered free scholarship for Palestinians, in particular in the health sector. But nowadays, we are facing a huge campaign saying that those doctors that are abroad is like a slavery. Imagine. They say because they know that part of those services are compensated. Other are free, but we receive income from these services. As identified as income, they say no, and they pressure countries, you must close the contract with Cuba. If not, we will not agree on that issue, etc. And for a small island in the Caribbean, it has been very difficult. And some of them have been very brave. And I remember the Prime Minister of Barbados saying, where are you during COVID times? You know where was with us, the Cuban doctors? Then, no. It's our sovereign right to decide to whom we will hide to take care of our population. This is the kind of pressures. But not all countries can sustain that pressure because we live in an interconnected, globalized world. A lot of dependence in the economic field. And during 30 years at the United Nations, it has been a resolution that requests the lifting of the embargo against Cuba. And Cuba has received a lot of international solidarity because there are a lot of decent people around the world saying, no, we don't accept injustice. We want to continue defending the international law because this is the world we want for us and for our new generations. And I can explain that nowadays we are seeing that there are an articulation between economic tools of pressures like tariff and also with the media. They create those narratives that no, that country will collapse because that dictatorship, they don't have leaders able to run in the country. No. You see, and then what in our case, and right now in our country, the situation is really critical. We are very close to entering a humanitarian situation, unfortunately, because in the last 5 months, only one ship of oil has entered to our country because people, enterprises, countries feel threatening for this use of tariffs against them if they sell oil to us. But oil is a vital resource. If you don't have oil, how you will maintain critical infrastructures? Then the news from my countries that I receive from family and I saw in the official media is sometimes it's depressing. Just a few weeks, it was a nurse explaining their daily life. She wake up, but she almost couldn't sleep because no electricity for air conditioner or fan. Then no electricity to iron the uniform of the kids. Huge problem to find food for the kids, a snack or breakfast. Okay, then second problem was no public transportation because if you don't have oil, how to maintain? In a way, she achieved to arrive to the hospital. When she arrived to the hospital, many medical equipment needs stable electricity. It is not shut down. Then those machines that keeps warm the newborn shut down. Then the nurses need to start ventilating manually the newborn babies. Imagine she was so tired, almost couldn't sleep, and then they rotate between nurses to do that. Imagine this reality for a small country. This is why we are saying that from the global south it's important to exchange experience, to raise their voices saying, no, this is not the world we want. We need, in a way, every country must to find their way. And he was talking about resistance. For us, it has been clear, resistance, resilience. Imagine, for first time, our scientists and engineers have developed a methodology to refine our crude, oil crude, that is very heavy. This is where resilience you can find in those critical situations. But it's not fair for a country to, during 67 years, more than 6 decades, imagine, resisting these hostilities every time. Then people will feel exhausted. But this is part of the design. What they are waiting is in this situation where people are struggling for water, because if you don't have electricity, how to pump water? Then they are waiting that population feels so irritated, so desperate, that we go to the streets for protest. Then now you will see the media, look at what is happening, and then they will say, they will pay it because we know there are millions of dollars for the subversion. Some people will start destroying public institutions. If this happens, you need to go to detain with police. And here is when they will say, you see, this is repression. We need to intervene because we need to defend democracy and human rights. Then it's clear the design. And this is why new forms of colonialism is clear for us. But it's important to share experience, to condemn, to denounce, and also for us it's also important international solidarity. And we really appreciate the opportunity to share views with all of you, because we are very far, but we are in this world together, and we are from the global south too. Then thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Excellency. Yes, thank you. 67 years. I was born in the year of the successful Cuban Revolution. And whether it's a small nation like Cuba, a small island, or a very large country like Iran and Palestine and other small territory, you know, the whole spectrum of tools of oppression and colonization, they apply, they squeeze. And the wonderful thing is, you know, whether you're from a small place or a big place, that kind of resilience is always there with a strong backbone. May I now please invite Dr. Imran to round us out. Thank you.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. Very good morning to you all. Her Excellency Ms. Yadira Hernandez, His Excellency Dr. Habib Reza Arzani, Honorable Mr. Tong Ven Wai, Prof. Nazari, Brother Ahmed Badri, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, a very good morning to you all again. Very honored to be speaking to this prestigious forum. I will try in this brief presentation to put Palestine into context. We are talking about imperialism. Prof. Habib Reza has just highlighted how imperialism has transformed its instruments and tools in the modern contemporary era. Looking at Palestine, Palestine has both aspects of classical imperialism and, of course, contemporary new imperialism. We started with a settler colonial occupation in Palestine, and we are ending up now with Greater Israel, or this expansionist imperialist regime in Palestine. Israel started as one of the tools of the Western imperialism. Eventually, it has transformed into an imperialist regime itself, an expansionist imperialist regime, something like Frankenstein in Western, literature. Of course, when people talk about imperialism, the first idea that comes to mind is that it's over. The Western imperialist powers have, brought down their flags, and we have our own, usually Western drone flags, but we have our own flags flying high. So we are free, we're independent. When the US attacked Iran, and we saw the international reaction, especially in the Muslim world, we realized that we're not so free and so sovereign after all. When the West, the Americans, the Israelis being the main tool, conducted a genocide in Gaza, we witnessed for 3 years, unfortunately, that the world is not free. The Muslim world in particular is not independent or sovereign, and that the international order is completely shaped and controlled by the Western imperialist powers. When Russia conducted a military operation in Ukraine, it was illegal, it was bad, it was condemned. When Israel massacred people live on TV for 3 years, it was, you just check it on ChatGPT, is what happened in Gaza a genocide or not, and it will tell you all. They will start answering you about how that is controversial, it's debatable. It's still not so clear if it is a genocide or not, when almost the entire scholarly literature of genocide experts is telling you this is a genocide, but ChatGPT and many other Western AI tools have a different opinion. So the world we live in is still shaped, unfortunately, by Western imperialism. And this ought to change, of course. Now, classical imperialism is about territorial expansion, about military invasions, about all of this. But the contemporary forms of imperialism that we see in many parts of the world, including Cuba and Iran and Venezuela as well, would include economic sanctions, coercion, sometimes, of course, espionage and other military activities. But under President Trump, he is actually going back to classical imperialism, military intervention, direct military intervention. In Iraq, 2003, George Bush administration tried to sugarcoat their imperialist intervention in Iraq, and they talked about democracy, spreading democracy. But thanks to Trump, he made it very clear in Iran that no, it was about oil. You've all seen his interviews. It's not about democracy. He was even correcting his fellow American colleague, Lindsey Graham, I think, one of the fanatic American congressmen, who was saying is democracy and so on and so on. And Trump said, no, it's about oil. It is actually about stealing and robbing resources. It's about controlling the international order. It's about making the imperialist powers richer, greater. But in our case in Palestine, it's unfortunately a bit worse. Settler colonialism, and you're all familiar with settler colonialism, is more than just an imperialist invasion or control of natives and of colonial subjects. It's actually about replacing them. These native populations that exist in a piece of land are the problem, of course, in the minds of the colonial settler colonial powers. So when the British invaded Malaya and probably half of the ancient world, they were looking for resources. In Malaya, they wanted rubber, they wanted tin, they wanted your other resources. Eventually, in the Gulf, for instance, they found out some oil as well. They wanted to steal. It was very simple. They wanted to steal all of these resources, ship it back to the UK, like they used to ship slaves, for instance, from Africa to Liverpool. They just wanted the resources. It was as simple as that. Bad, of course, but it was very simple. Today, in Palestine, settler colonialism does not want the resources of Gaza only. They want, of course, whatever gas we have offshore, but they want the entire place. They want the land. Look at what's happening in the West Bank. In Gaza, it was in brutal force for 3 years. You have all witnessed it. But look at it in the West Bank. I'm very sure that most of us here in this room who are interested in the Palestinian issue are not actually following the details of what's happening. They're confiscating land day by day. They're stealing agricultural land every day. They are, trying to find a way to expel the Palestinians out of historical Palestine. One of the most used terminologies in the Israeli media today is transfer. Transfer. They talk about it openly on TV, in TV shows, in newspapers. What do they mean by transfer? They actually are simply talking about transferring the entire Palestinian population out of now the West Bank to Jordan or wherever. But they have actually implemented that in Gaza. For the last 2.5 years, they transferred, they forcibly displaced more than 1 million Palestinians. If things worked well for them, they would have completely emptied Gaza from the 2.2 million Palestinian residents. So settler colonialism is about robbing you and getting rid of you completely. The problem with settler colonialism, brothers and sisters, is that it worked elsewhere, unfortunately. It worked in North America. The white or pink colonialist populations moved into North America, cleansed the entire North America from the original inhabitants, and eventually expanded westward until they controlled the entire North American continent. In Australia, they did the same. They're yet to apologize properly to the Aborigine populations of Australia. In South Africa, it succeeded partially and eventually collapsed. In Palestine, they still are ambitious and think it can work. We all think it's ridiculous getting rid of the remaining 6-7 million Palestinians who still live in historical Palestine. Is just a ridiculous idea. But in the minds of Israeli ministers, not fringe marginal figures, in the minds of the Israeli Prime Minister himself, Benjamin Netanyahu, his colleagues in the cabinet, Ben-Gvir, Smotrich, and others, it's actually doable. They think if it was done in North Gaza, it can be done in South Gaza. If it worked in the Jenin refugee camp the last few months, it can work in the entire West Bank. If it worked in southern Lebanon, this morning, one of the last pieces of news I saw was Israeli Minister Ben-Gvir saying that no one will return to South Lebanon. We will continue to destroy houses in South Lebanon. So it's not about Hezbollah or about Hamas in Gaza. It's not about what you do to resist them. It's about you existing. Your existence is the problem. So settler colonialism is about getting rid of the entire populations under their domination. Now, Gaza has exposed to a large extent the imperialist international order that we live in. For many of us, we really thought we were independent. We raise our flags, we have military parades, we have national anthems, we celebrate our independence every year. But eventually, when the US decides something, not many can resist. A genocide was conducted live before our eyes, and for most of the global South, forget about the West. The West was, a perpetrator in the genocide in Gaza. The European Union member states, with a few exceptions, the US, of course, Canada, Australia, they armed Israel to conduct a genocide. The problem for them was that we were complaining about it, not the genocide itself. I'm talking about the global South. The global South is not independent after all. A wake-up call is really necessary. We think that we are independent, but when a genocide was taking place, how many countries intervened to end the genocide? Although they are all signatories to the Genocide Convention. Very few. Yemen intervened, of course. Non-state actors intervened, Hezbollah, the Iraqi military factions and others. And Iran intervened eventually. But for the rest of the global South, I would say South Africa probably took some legal action at least. But for many of us in the global South, Gaza should have been a wake-up call. Unfortunately, it was not. Iran, the aggression on Iran should have been a wake-up call. What's happening now in Cuba is another wake-up call. What happened a few months ago to Venezuela should be a wake-up call. So Gaza and the other incidents I mentioned are actually a wake-up call. They really exposed the double standards of the West and the weakness and the vulnerability of the global South. I'm not saying this to say that we're doomed and we cannot do anything about it. I'm saying this because I think the global South can do a lot, but it has to come together. It has to do what Iran has done. You come to destroy my territory, my infrastructure, to rob my resources. I'm going to teach you a lesson. This is what happened. This is what the Palestinian resistance in Gaza has done. Well, they don't have, unfortunately, we don't have a strait right next to Gaza. In the case of Iran, thanks to geography, they have a strait right next to them. Yemen also has its own strait. We don't have one in Gaza. For many in the world, the shipment of oil and other resources is more important than human life. Like thousands and thousands were massacred in Gaza and thousands were killed in Lebanon, but it doesn't really matter. We cannot block petrol passage, But in the case of Iran, the US couldn't do much because the oil prices were going up. So they had to come to terms with Iran. So what I'm saying is that the global South should do what Iran is doing. Coming to a conclusion and back to Palestine, we are not dealing with a small occupation in Palestine. We're dealing with a settler colonial project manifesting itself now in what we all call Greater Israel. If the world does not do anything about it, you will have similar problems everywhere in the world. I think yesterday the Turkish foreign minister, Dr. Hakan Fidan, was saying that Israel is not a regional problem anymore. It is actually a global problem. If you don't realize that, you will have them at your doorsteps. When you kill with impunity, when you can carry out a genocide and get away with it, when you can expand your territories as much as you wish and get away with it, then everybody is doomed. You're not safe in Southeast Asia. You're not safe in Africa. You're not safe in Latin America. What Israel is doing in Gaza, God forbid, can be replicated elsewhere. Therefore, it is our responsibility in the global South because we have a moral compass. I don't have much expectations on the West. It is our responsibility in the global South to actually take action, to come together, to work to end the ongoing genocide in Gaza, the ongoing imperialist Israeli aggression against the entire region, and to reverse this development. Greater Israel, in simple words, is not about having control over historical Palestine only. Some thought it is about that. It's not about that. It's about an expansionist regime that can reach as far as it can. In the minds of Israeli decision makers, they think if small Netherlands, small Holland, managed to rule an empire in Indonesia with little resources, why don't technologically advanced, rich, empowered Israel control the entire region from the river to the river, from the Nile to the Euphrates? In their minds, they're actually really discussing this in the public now. Why not we have the oil of Kuwait? Why should the Kuwaitis have that much oil in that small territory? Why should southern Lebanon, which has some sort of biblical links, to the Israelite tribes that existed some thousands of years ago, why doesn't this land belong to the current state of Israel? Why doesn't South Syria become a proxy state for Israel? They even have a name for it, Bashan. Why does not the oil of Iraq, pump into the Israeli economy and so on? If they think this way, there is no way to reason with them. There is no way to change this and reverse it through debates and through academic forums. Of course, it's necessary so that we figure out what's going on. We open our eyes. The way to deal with this Israeli expansionist dream is what the resistance in Gaza has done, what the resistance in Lebanon has done, what the resistance in Yemen and Iraq has done, and what the resistance in Iran has done. That's the way to reverse an expansionist regime. You have to slap them on the face so that they stop their aggression and their expansion. But individual actors cannot do it alone. This is where the role of countries like Malaysia, Indonesia, African countries, Latin American countries, BRICS countries, and others becomes very, very important and very essential. We have to come together. We have to cooperate. Not everyone has to do everything. Not everyone can do the same. But together we can actually do miracles. We have to think about that. And I really hope that this Israeli regime that has wreaked havoc across the Middle East and caused a lot of mess in the 20th century will cease to exist in the 21st century, and this system of apartheid will be dismantled. The imperialist order that we have is a structure. The settler colonial regime in Palestine is a structure. It's not just the development that took place in 2023 or 2024 or 2025. No, it is a structure. The way out is to dismantle this structure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Imran. Core lesson there. In the face of oppression, we cannot just back down. You mentioned what is that? Finkelstein? No, not Finkelstein. Frankenstein. Frankenstein. The image popped up, and I thought, gee, this guy looks better than the Prime Minister of Israel, and certainly better than the President of the United States. We started late. We only have a few minutes. Sorry about that, but we do have a few minutes for questions. Yes, Professor, please.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I suppose one of the basic questions is whether countries like Malaysia, Indonesia, and other small countries really have in it the seriousness to be anti-imperialist. And I raise the question because, I agree with what speakers have said, especially with Dr. Muslim just now. But if I take the example of Malaysia, our country cannot even fix it so that Iranians and Cubans can have bank accounts. We cannot even do that. Iranian bank, it's extremely difficult for Iranians to have bank accounts. Sometimes they have accounts and they are cancelled. My wife is from Iran and her credit card was cancelled. I understand that the former Cuban ambassador, His Excellency Mr. Florentino himself, could not have an account. Maybe it's the same with Mrs. Hernandez. This is ridiculous. So all this rhetoric about being anti-imperialist, which our government, does, promote the idea, but we cannot even do that. And the fact is, it is not because of US sanctions. This is the thing. It is nothing to do with US sanctions. The local banks refuse in many cases to do due diligence. Because in Singapore, Iranians have no problem having bank accounts. But in Malaysia, they do. So this relates to the issue of studying imperialism, promoting the problem of imperialism, which is something that I don't have time to discuss it. But I have 3 questions very quickly. My first question for Dr. Arzani. Given all the goodwill that Iran has built up as a result of the war and Iran's resistance, do you think some of that goodwill will be eroded by Iran's plan to charge a toll or fees through the Straits of Hormuz, given that for years, for decades, for centuries actually, there was never any charge. And that also, according to international law, there should not be any charge. So I was wondering whether you have any comment on that. Also, I wanted to ask, and this is for you or for anyone else, one elephant in the room is the Sunni Shia issue. Even in Malaysia and certainly in many countries, Sunnis have said that either we should not support Iran because it is not a Muslim country. This has been openly said by many Sunni ulama actually. Or at best, we support Iran even though they are not real Muslims or they are deviant Muslims. So we support them even though they are wrong religiously, but we support them because of the anti-imperialist or anti-American stance. So I think at least in Malaysia, we are not having sufficient dialogue and discourse to discuss this problem of our Shia phobia, I would say, in Malaysia. We have been very hostile to Shiites for at least 20 years in Malaysia. The other elephant in the room is, which we had not discussed, are the Arab proxy states of the US, because they are part of the problem. So I was wondering whether you have any comments on that. For Mrs. Hernandez, my question is very simple. What confidence does Cuba have in anti-imperialist or anti-systemic movements like BRICS? Do you see any future positive role of BRICS as far as from the point of view of Cuba's experience? And my last question is for Dr. the Muslim, this specifically on Palestine. Do you feel that the Malaysian media does give enough attention to the problem of settler colonialism and imperialism as far as Palestine is concerned? Because one of the problems I see is that they never even use the term colonialism. They speak about occupation. So I wonder whether you can comment on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Farid Al-Attas. For your first question about the Strait of Hormuz, you know that according to MOU that is supposed to be signed, and we don't know that for how long is it going to be permanent, or maybe because it is the first MOU that is going to be in, the framework is something not extraordinary, but the framework is, let me say a new one, because it is not just everything is going to be written in that MOU. If they are going to fulfill their, the acts that they promised, then we are going to do the next one. It is not going to just signing the MOU and that's it. No, it's the 30 days and then 60 days. And after that, it's going to be permanent if they fulfill their promises. And even for our side. For Strait of Hormuz, we say that, because at the beginning we mentioned that we didn't close it, but we control it. And you know that according to the law, as an international law, the Strait of Hormuz belongs to Iran and Oman, only these two countries. And this is not international, water for everyone. It is only for these two countries, and they can control it. Even in the MOU that is going to be signed, we didn't mention about the toll, but because we say that right now for these 30 and 60, and then 30 and 60, there are two, timing. For the 60 days, we are going to open it up, means that we are going to give permission to all ships to pass from there, but we didn't mention about the toll. This is one of the most important things that they are going to discuss about it, and it depends to other acts and other promises that if they are going to fulfill it, according to that we are going to decide. This is the first thing. For Shia and Sunni, as you mentioned, this is correct. We are trying our best. You know that in Iran, even maybe this is for some of you, this is very, let me say surprising, that in Iran, 15% of our population are Sunni people. And you know that it was just 3 months ago, that some of our ulama, Shia and Sunni ulama, they came here, great scholars came here, and it was very surprising for some of the ulama here that, oh, you have only, Sunni. Say, of course, it is not for nowadays. We have Shia and Sunni that they were living in Iran for, let me say, after, from the beginning that we accepted Islam till now. We have this, it was a sequence that we have in Iran, but we have to work on that more and more from two sides, from Malaysia and from Iran. And right now, I'm going to mention, as the cultural counselor of the Embassy of Iran, that we are ready for any kind of bringing close these two great nations together and to know more about each other. And right now, I'm going to announce it that we are ready even to be a sponsor for great muftis of Malaysia. Not only one mufti, the muftis of all states. We are going to be their sponsor to go to Iran, to see our population, to see our ulama, to see our seminary schools, and then they are going to decide that this is, and then they will see that we are very, very close. We are very, very close. And the small matters that we have, you see that unfortunately, Christian and Jews in the world, they are going to come together. And you know that there is a great difference between but they say, okay, we need this kind of unity. So I don't know why. And let me tell you that this is one of the plan of imperialism. And it is not for nowadays. It was from the before to bring, this unity amongst us. And with the disunity among us, then definitely they can rule us. And for the neighbors of the third question that Prof. Farid mentioned, I'm going to mention that, that we didn't starting attacking, and let me say, responding to the attack of America by the bases that he had in Arab countries. We didn't start it. And even, let me tell you that before, the war, we told them that if America is going to use his bases in your country, we are not going, because we don't have any access to America, but we have access to the bases of America in your country. Some of them, they mentioned that we don't have any control to their bases. This is their bases in our land. You say, okay, if you don't have any control on the bases of America in your land, we are not going to respond you. We are going to respond the bases of America, which is located in your land. And it's very clear. If we announce it, some of them, they accept. Some of them, they change their, strategy. But some others, unfortunately, they didn't. So we are going to deal with them according to whatever that they're going to deal with us. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Professor, for your question. On the question of BRICS, for us, BRICS is a real alternative platform that in particular promote complementarity. And this is really important because the other that we can find is coalitions based on interest. And this is why what is promoting BRICS for us is a real alternative, a real platform. But the road is very difficult. This idea of the Bank of BRIC, I've participated in some discussions, technical discussion, very difficult because we have one big problem. That is all the financial system is based on these switch codes, etc. And it was very interesting that a few months ago, China explained that China is ready to present an alternative to SWIFT. But you can imagine, it will be a huge change, and I'm not sure that all the countries will agree to do that. Then, for us, what is offered in BRICS is really important, is an alternative, because promote complementarity. The other, you will see, there are coalitions of interest, etc. That has shown us that it's not the real decision to take. The other first question you raised on different roles, small countries, etc. From us also, civil society has an important role to play. Because sometimes government change in countries, they engage in some agreements that even the parliament didn't know that what they were, working on, adopt agreement, that withdraw from agreements, and then sometimes happens because you don't have the real involvement of actors from civil society. But this is also difficult because that activism is something that doesn't grow up alone. You must, to promote, to try to exercise your rights as citizen and be involved in those important processes. But for us, the role of civil society is important. Another issue that, in general, the topic we are addressing today, is that this narrative from the medias are creating like a pretext that we each other consider we are very different. But from my personal experience, I can tell you that there are a lot of in common of Muslim people, Catholic people, communist people, because those people are really committed to their goals, promote good values based on the dignity of the human being. But that narrative is trying to create that pretext that no extremist people, etc. All of that is to justify aggression. We are not so different. We are human beings. We just decide different approach in life, but we are not so different. This is the media narrative that, promote that justification. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Farid. With regards to media, I worked in a newspaper for 1 year, and let me confess something. Journalists are lazy. I hope our friends from media here don't get offended. They consume whatever you give them. You write a piece, you write a press statement, they are going to do some rewording. In the past, they used to do paraphrasing by themselves. Now they use AI, and they'll publish it. The problem with many in the Malaysian media is that they consume Western media reports as it is. AFP, Associated Press, or whatever it is. They already have subscriptions. They pay money to get this news. So they get a piece of news about what's happening in Gaza or Iran or whatever. Sometimes they don't even bother to do some paraphrasing. So we end up with Western terminology. We end up with imperialist terminology. So sometimes you see them talking about the Palestinian resistance as if they were kind, they say militant groups. Sometimes they would even rather use the word terrorist or so. If they think, if the same journalist actually stops being lazy and thinks about it for a while, he or she will rephrase it, will write it in a better way. The problem is that we don't produce knowledge, we consume it. In not only in Malaysia, in most of the Muslim world, the way out is to put a little bit of effort. I for instance, salute the Turkish media for that. The Anadolu agency, for instance, the government pumped a lot of resources into making it a really powerful media agency. They produce their news now. They use their own terminology. Not that I agree with their framing of news, but they tell the world what's happening from their own perspective. I hope Malaysia will do the same. I know very well that there is a goodwill. I've met with the current media or communications minister and with his deputy. Both of them are friendly, supportive of the Palestinian struggle, supportive of the global south. Their instruction is cover the Palestinian issue in your news. That's why you see on RTM, the journalists sometimes even wear the Palestinian shawl. But the problem is not in the newsreader. The problem is in the newsroom, in the editorial. If the news is not written in a proper way, in your own Malaysian perspective, forget about the Palestinian or Iranian perspective. If it's not written in a Malaysian perspective, you end up telling the American news in a Malay language or in sometimes Tamil or Mandarin language. Maybe they have to put a little bit more effort on telling the story the way they would like the world to know it. Unless this happens, then we're in trouble. Thank you.
I have to ask our hosts whether we have another question, time for another question, or should we stop this? We have to stop this. So apologies, there were a few more hands. We have to stop the first panel session. So thank you to all the speakers, and thank you everyone.
We would like to ask moderator and the panelists to remain there, and we'd like to invite Puan Sri Norma Hashim from Hashim Sani Center for Palestine Studies and Dr. Ahmad Badri from IAIS to hand over some token of appreciation for the guests. I think we start with from Hashim Sani Center first. I think because Tong is starts next to you, so maybe we start with the Tong first. Yeah. Next is Her Excellency Yadira Ledesma Hernandez. The next one is Dr. Habib Reza. And finally to Dr. Muslimah Imran. Yes, we would like to call for a group photo. Don't run away yet, Tong. Freestyle, maybe a peace sign. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you. Thank you to the moderator and the distinguished panelists. So we will right away start with the second session. For those online, you can just stick around because we're going to start with the second session, inshallah. Just give a few minutes for everyone to settle a bit. Yeah. Okay, we are ready to dive into our second panel discussion. So we hope everyone can still remain focused for the second session, inshallah. The second session will be on economics engines driving these geopolitical realities, titled Economic and Financial Dimensions of Western Imperialism. Our moderator, Dr. Ahmad Badri Abdullah, is already here. So we would like to welcome the rest of the panelists. Professor Jomo Wame Sundaram from Khazanah Research Institute. Dr. Fabia Nadwa Fikri from Sekolah Merdeka. And Professor Emeritus Dr. Nazari Ismail from Hashim Sani Center for Palestine Studies. Ladies and gentlemen, we would like to request your undivided attention to the second forum now. Dr. Ahmad Badri, over to you.
Thank you. Test. Test. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, distinguished guests, colleagues, friends. Welcome to our second session on the economic and financial dimension of Western imperialism. If imperialism is often discussed in terms of military and politics, I think this session asks a more important question. What are the economic infrastructures that persist and allow domination long after the formal colonial rule has ended? I think today's empire rarely appears through flags as armies and occupation, as mentioned by Dr. Muslim Imran just now. But now it also operates through debt, dependency, monetary hierarchy, supply chain control, and whatnot. And I think the relevance of our discussion today has been underscored by a recent development in international politics. I think especially at the Munich Security Conference, February this year, whereby the United States Secretary of State, Mark Rubio, spoke on the need to build a new Western century, advocating renewed Western industrial strength, technological leadership, strategic control, and critical supply chains. And critics has questioned whether such a call represent a re-emergence of older imperial logics through new instruments of influence. And this debate resonates deeply with contemporary realities, from the use of sanctions and economic pressures against countries, as we heard just now, Venezuela, Cuba, and also Iran, and also Palestine. So we are fortunate to have our three panelists here who speaks to this challenge from complementary vantage points. I think we have two emeritus professors with us today. So I will be introducing briefly of our panelists for this session. Our first panelist is Dr. Fadia Nadwa Fikri. I think I know her as an activist lawyer, and now she is a public intellectual. Her research examines the intellectual history of decolonization of the British racializing project with a focus on Malaya and Singapore, I guess. And her recent publication and writing has addresses racism, inequality, and also cultural, inequality. I think welcome, Dr. Fadia, and thank you for being with us. Our second panelist is Prof. Emeritus Dr. Muhammad Nazri Ismail. He's the director of the Hashim Sani Center for the Palestine Study at University Malaya. I think the whole forum today is his idea. Thank you, Prof, for your suggestion and also your effort to make our program today a reality. And our third panelist, he doesn't need any introduction, and he advised me not to introduce him so long. I think Prof. Jomo want to introduce him that he was born during the late colonial period and now advises research at the Kazana Research Institute. So without further ado, I would like to go to Dr. Fadia. Dr. Fadia, your research on the British racializing project and on the Malay politics suggests that empire survives through ideas as much as institution. I think the word of Stamford Raffles, The History of Java, also represent this, where it also represent the kind of, I call it epistemic imperialism. So how did colonial rule in Malaya shape the categories of race, class, and political legitimacy, and how does that kind of categories continue to organize the division in our society today? Over to you, Dr. Nadia.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you so much, Dr. Badri, for the introduction. Thank you so much to organizers for inviting me to speak today on this very important topic about US imperialism being the primary contradiction in the world that we live in. Of course, I think it's important to also talk about Malaya. That's the research that I've been doing for the past 6 years. And I think to understand imperialism or Western imperialism, particularly US imperialism, is very important because as the revolutionary Ghassan Kanafani, the Palestinian revolutionary Ghassan Kanafani said, wherever you strike imperialism, you serve the world revolution. That means we talk about imperialism just now in Palestine, in Cuba, in other parts of the world, or the global south, as we call it. We also need to understand how imperialism manifests itself in this part of the world, in Southeast Asia. And Malaya is very important because it served at the time in the 40s, right after World War II, it served as the model for counterinsurgency that was used by both the British imperialists and the US imperialists to decimate national liberation movements in this region. And also, the model that was implemented in Malaya was exported to suppress national liberation movements in Vietnam and then in Indonesia. And today we see the same model being enacted in the Philippines, in Venezuela, all over the third world. So without understanding that context, I think it's quite impossible for us to imagine the true nature of imperialism and also the alternatives to imperialism. So I think we are here today. I agree with the first panel when they said that we are not here to talk about this academically, but we are here to talk about the analysis that we need right now in this pressing moment to inform the strategy that we need to employ to liberate the oppressed, the humiliated, the colonized, those subjugated by the primary contradiction of our time, which is US imperialism. So we talk about race. So Dr. Badri asked me to talk about these categories: race, class, citizenship. When we talk about sovereignty, when we talk about independence, I think it's important to look at the history of colonialism in this part of the world. I'm going to focus on Malaya. Right after World War II, the British, after suffering humiliating defeat at the hands of Japan, needed to restore their great power status. They lost India. So they had to come to Malaya, particularly because Malaya was the largest dollar earner in the British Commonwealth due to rubber and tin production. Again, the economics of imperialism. They needed profits. So they needed to come back to Malaya, particularly because of that. And how did they justify the recolonization of Malaya is through this idea of race. So race, we talk about race a lot. So we think race is just a category that classifies people. But race is actually a technology of power that is used not just to justify colonial rule, but also to structure societies. So in Malaysia, to understand race, so race is this modern colonial construct, but it has material ramifications. To understand how race manifests itself, we have to look at the specific historical context in which this creature called race came into existence. So when they came back to Malaya to recolonize Malaya, obviously one thing that we don't talk about enough is the anti-colonial resistance put forth by the Malayan left, both the Malay left and also the non-Malay left. When I was in school, I did not study this particular history. It was completely erased from our collective memory about the Malayan left that tried to subvert race, the racializing project that would turn Malaya into a neo-colonial Malay ethno-state upon formal independence, attainment of formal independence in 1957. So I think to understand colonialism, to understand imperialism as the broader system that is trying to exploit and subjugate people, we have to understand also the resistance put forth by the natives, by the indigenous populations against imperialist forces. So that is what happened in Malaya. And because of that resistance, the British, because they came back with this promise that we will export liberal democracy to Malaya and the rest of the world. And they were working closely with the US. So they had a special relationship with the US to think about how do we stop what was going on in Vietnam. And the US understood that it's almost difficult to win this war against the Vietnamese people who want full liberation. So they were like, okay, at the same time, we still need to defend our hegemony here in Southeast Asia. So they worked together to suppress the national liberation movement led by the Malay left and also the non-Malay left at the time. And what did they do? They constructed this idea that this land, Malaya, belongs to the Malays. And they also used Islam to justify that process of racialization, to say that because the Malays are Muslims, therefore we are protecting the Malay Muslim community from the other races, the Chinese and the Indians, who were brought in to become indentured laborers at the time to extract Malaya's wealth. But at the same time, because the waves of decolonization were raging in Southeast Asia, people at the time started thinking about the right to self-determination. The masses particularly, because they were following the leaders leading the national liberation movement who were working day and night to raise national consciousness, that this land belongs to the people, and it belongs not just to the Malays, but those who regard this country as their homeland. So that's the basis of sovereignty and self-determination. And what did the British do? Seeing that movement getting more and more popular support, they decided to come up with different schemes, constitutional schemes, because for them, we cannot be too hard this time, because we have to also portray that we are for democracy, liberal democracy, exported throughout the third world. And we need to show that, we are trying to use constitutional means to achieve full independence for Malaya. So we are here to guide the people of Malaya. They are not ready yet to attain full independence. So we're going to guide them. And of course, they needed collaborators. And they worked with the Malay aristocrats and also the Malay rulers, because they knew that these groups of people, their interests are aligned with the British and of course the US at the time. And the Malay left, the National Liberation Movement, was conscious of this fact that they are using race to divide the people, to prevent the possibility of all Malayan people to come together to forge anti-colonial unity that is desperately needed to achieve independence. What they did was they drafted this constitution called the Malayan Constitution that came into effect upon the attainment of formal independence in 1957. So the Malayan Constitution is the same constitution that we have today, which is called the Federal Constitution of Malaysia, because it had to be changed the name after the formation of Malaysia in 1963. But when we talk about race, I think it's important to understand that race was institutionalized following the formal independence in 1957, and race is embedded in our constitution, the highest law of the land. So the constitution is the supreme law of the land, and we have this idea of race deeply embedded in it. So what does that mean? What does that look like? So under the Malayan constitution, or the federal constitution that we have today, we have no equal rights because the Malays are given the special position and also special privileges because this idea that they own the land. Other people are just foreigners. They came and they're second-class citizens. That's the reality. So race is not something that just classifies people, as I mentioned earlier, but it is something that is turned into a structure that governs and also informs our political life. And we see today, we still have debates about, equal rights between Malays and non-Malays, the basic rights to education, healthcare. We are still debating that today. Do we have enough scholarship to give to people? What about people who cannot access higher education? We are still arguing about that today without thinking about the constitution that is legitimizing all this inequality that we have in our society. And of course, to understand that is very important because that was what the British wanted. Because if you managed to ensure that the Muslim Malay majority, that their position will be protected, then you will have their full support. No one can challenge the state. So that is the reality. And I think it's important when we talk about that to look at the resistance to this racializing project put forth by the first united front called the Putra AMCGA Coalition. So the Putra AMCGA Coalition is the first multi-ethnic, anti-colonial united front that fought for true independence of Malaya, and they drafted a very important document called the 1947 People's Constitutional Proposals for Malaya, and also for Singapore, because we don't see Singapore as separate from Malaya. And in that constitution, I'm glad that our Cuban ambassador is here because I studied that constitution and I saw why it became a threat to UMNO and also the British, because that constitution that was drafted by the Malay left together with the non-Malay left in Malaya and Singapore at the time, they sought to give equal rights to all Malayan people. Not just civil, political rights, but also economic, social, and cultural rights. When I read the text as I was drafting my thesis, I was like, wow, this is very similar to the Cuban constitution that was passed after the Cuban Revolution. And ours was drafted in 1947 because the drafters of this document understood to challenge imperialism, to challenge colonialism, to challenge capitalism, it is important for us to come up with a model, with a constitution that would redistribute the wealth of the country and restore the dignity of the people. I like what our Iranian brother said just now about human dignity. 2 minutes left. Human dignity, that's the most basic thing that sometimes gets lost when we talk about all these issues that we have to deal with daily. It's actually about restoring the stolen dignity of the people under imperialism, which is the highest stage of capitalism. So that's why I think it's very important to understand why Malaya must be closely studied as a model, not just to reinforce the foundations of capitalism, but also as a model to dismantle that. Then only we can understand how important it is for us to talk about human dignity. When we talk about the socialist project in Cuba, despite sanctions, they managed to give free education to everyone. They even have a program Fidel, when Fidel was still alive, called Elam, where they are still giving scholarships to other people from the third world countries to come and study medicine for free. We have a lot of Palestinians in Cuba studying medicine on one condition: you have to go back to your country and serve your community. That is human dignity. And healthcare, while our people are lining up on a daily basis trying to get the most basic need, which is healthcare, Cuba can still afford to give free healthcare to its population. That's something that we have to think about when we think about the systems that are governing us today and those who are actively defending those systems. What do? We are clearly still living under neocolonialism, where our governments, particularly in Southeast Asia, are still trying to please the US. We know that the Straits of Malacca have been used by US warships for the past 3 years. When we have actionists in the UK, for example, calling for people to stop these ships from docking, calling people to disrupt capital flow by doing direct action against weapons companies. And we have our comrades in the UK now sentenced as terrorists, even though their charges are not terrorism charges. So these comrades have been disrupting capital flow in the UK by destroying companies that produce weapons to kill our Palestinian brothers and sisters in Palestine. Direct action is justified because it's a form of resistance. So this is something that we have to start to think about more seriously. What do? It's not just about providing the clarity in terms of analysis, but also in terms of action. And of course, our comrades from Cuba keep mentioning the word resistance, and also from Iran, resistance. We have nonviolent resistance, and we also have armed struggle, which is legally justified under international law. It's not just a legal obligation for you to resist with arms, but also for you to use your moral obligation to resist imperialist subjugation and domination with arms. So when we talk about violence and non-violence, we have to also be careful because we don't want to end up demonizing armed resistance, which is legally and morally justified. So I think to talk about counterinsurgency is also important because Malaya was a successful model at the time in terms of enacting and also exporting imperialist counterinsurgency to suppress movements that are challenging US imperialism. So right now, I think it's important to talk about this erased history of the political actors involved to offer not just theoretical clarity, but also methodological clarity as to how do we move forward as a people that cares about human dignity. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Fadia, for sharing with us on the historical background of imperialism, especially in Malaya, and also how some colonial ideas shape our socio-economic realities today. So I would like to go to our second panelist, Prof. Nazari. I think, Prof. Nazari, your work on debt and also term in Islam as riba, and the lending for profit industry suggests that financial crisis is not merely episodic failures in 10 years sequence, but symptoms of a deeper civilizational order. I think, Prof. Nazari, how should we connect the debt industry norms in a single framework to understand the idea of what we call as economic imperialism? Over to you, Prof.
Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulil karim wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Terima kasih. Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator, Dr. Badri. I just was thinking about when Dr. Fadia mentioned about Vietnam just now. It was a very difficult country for America to conquer or to control. But now Vietnam is supposed to be free. But I was asked recently by the BDS, I'm the chairman of BDS Malaysia, where they boycott movement against Israel. And I was contacted by BDS colleague to make a police report about a ship that was traveling from Asia, a country in Asia, to supply bombs to Israel. And that, on a ship called Catherine, operated by European company based in Kuala Lumpur. That's the reason why I had to make a police report. But the bomb actually came from where, From Vietnam. They are the supplier of bombs to Israel, which they were supposed to be a liberated country and fighting against colonial and imperialism, but they are now working hand in hand with Zionists to kill Palestinians and babies and children. Another important fact I want to share with you, when I read recently that South Africa, which is supposed to be liberated from Western Afrikaners who came to conquer and take away black lands. Recently, the blacks of South Africa were demonstrating and angry at other blacks who were immigrants in South Africa. They were calling on the South African government to get rid of the other blacks who were trying to find jobs in South Africa. So what happened to their spirit of brotherhood? Why are they so selfish? As selfish as the Muslims of Malaysia towards the Muslims of Rohingya, right? Why are they behaving in such a selfish manner towards people who are running away from persecution? So these are some things that tells you there's something wrong. Something is going wrong somewhere. And another fact which I want to share with you, which may want to make you think, is that as we know, America is the main enabler of the genocide in Gaza, right? But that country is bankrupt. It is owing, the federal government is about 40 trillion in debt. You add up the corporate debt, it's another about maybe 10 trillion, and then you have household debt of about 30 trillion. That's about 70 trillion in debt. But they are the enabler of genocide. Where did the money come from then? If they are a bankrupt country, how can a bankrupt country? So this is Professor Kotlikov of Boston University, that America is actually technically bankrupt because it will never be able to settle its debt. It will never be able to settle its debt. They are paying about 1 trillion in interest rate alone per year. And the debt is growing all the time, right? Growing all the time. So how are they going to settle the debt? But it's also the main enabler of the genocide in Gaza. How can you reconcile that? Okay, that is why we need to understand the nature of the financial system that is now encircling us. I would like to reterm, when we say Western imperialism, I think it can be a bit, the real criminals behind all this for me are the Western financial and political elites. Don't hide that part. The financial elites, they are the ones who are responsible for many things that are happening around the world, working together with the political elites who are greedy for power, sometimes driven by ideological, like Zionism, for example, to kill and etc., do injustice. But behind them are financial elites who see opportunities from all this, make more money for themselves. Because the genocide in Gaza, for example, is costing so much money. One Hellfire missile costs about $600,000 Malaysian ringgit. Can you imagine that? One Hellfire missile that is shot to demolish a building. That is one bungalow in Malaysia, 600,000. And how many missiles have they used? It's very expensive, right? One tank costs about 15 million of 15 to 20 million ringgit. One tank, Merkava tank. And how many have been destroyed? So can you imagine how much money they are spending? And they are still spending for more than 3 years now in Gaza. Where did the money come from? And this is making a lot of money for some people. Because the US debt is, as I said, 40 trillion, right? And the global 70 trillion. And the global debt is about 335 trillion or something like that. Can you imagine how much money they are making based on that debt alone? If it is interest rate is 1%, it's already 3 trillion already. 353 trillion global debt. If you convert to Malaysian ringgit, there is no more term to use. What is after trillion? It's quadrillion. How many zeros are there? And if you total up the gold that is available in the world today, that's about 220,000 kilometric ton. If you convert to dollars at current prices, it's about 30 trillion. 30 trillion. Convert to dollars at current prices. All the gold in the world from time of dawn of civilization, you collect all the gold, there's only about 30 trillion. The debt of US, how much just now? It's 40 trillion already. The gold is 350. So in other words, you collect all the gold in the world, you cannot settle the debt. And that is, you see how the financial class was so cunning. They knew, they were so greedy, they wanted to make as much money as possible, and they changed the form of money that people were using before from physical gold and physical stuff to something which does not have a physical limit. And that is the reason why now you have 350 trillion US global debt, with interest income to these financial elites. And there's no limit. What is the limit? The limit is people's willingness to work to pay back. That's the limit. And that's the reason why you see now people are working around the world, sometimes 3 jobs in order to make ends meet, right? And still they cannot have enough money to feed their children, even after 3 jobs. And as a result, they don't want any more children because they cannot feed their children after 3 jobs. So they don't want any more children. And that's the reason you see in Malaysia now, when people, our grandmothers last time used to have 15 children per lady. One case in Malacca is 22 children, one mother. You know what is the fertility rate in Malaysia now? You need 2.1 for the population to grow. Now, in Malaysia, it's 1.4, below 2. So, we are shrinking population because people don't have enough money to have a family. And that is the reason why we are shrinking. And for more developed countries, so-called, like Korea, the number is more pitiful. Per lady, 0.8. Even one whole body is missing, one part, 0.8 only. Why? Because they cannot afford to have children. In Japan, it's the same thing also. And as a result, you have people who are dying alone because they don't have children, nobody to take care of them. The last one figure was informed to me, between 30,000, some 70,000 people are dying in Japan alone without people knowing they have died. So the world is being subjugated. They are suffering, working like crazy, and still cannot have enough money to pay, right? And they are fighting among each other. Blacks against blacks in South Africa, Muslims against Muslims in Malaysia, right? Hating other Muslims because they cannot find enough space in the beds in the hospital to give birth, because so many immigrant mothers, they said, and we are paying tax and they are not paying tax, so you get lost. All this wrong here. They are hating each other, right? And those who suffer the most, actually, among the working class, incidentally, are in the West. Imperial source. America. You go to America, almost, I think 20%, almost 20% are poor people. 17 to 18% poverty rate. So you go to big cities in America, you will see thousands and thousands of people living in tents. If you drive to San Francisco, when I was driving on the road to San Francisco in my taxi, before I enter the city, I can see the homeless people living in tents on the streets. We are witnessing the same thing in Malaysia now, but it's a crisis in America now. People living in tents everywhere because they cannot afford to stay in homes, because they don't have enough money for accommodation, so they are living in tents. So when I say to Malaysians, we are not as bad as America now. Why? Because we are not as developed as America yet. Because we are so crazy about becoming a developed country. Once we are developed, then everybody will be living in tents. That's what's happening, right? Okay, now. So now you can see behind all this is a system that is strangling people. That's strangling. So when they don't have enough oxygen in their brain, that's why they cannot think properly. And that is why they are hating Rohingyas, they are hating fellow blacks, they are fighting against each other because they cannot think properly, because they are desperate for oxygen. So just like in water, you see when people are desperate for, fish are desperate for water, human beings or animals are desperate for oxygen, they will fight each other, right? Because they are desperate to live. And that's what's happening now. People are desperate to live. And that's why they hate each other. They're fighting against each other. But they don't realize behind that is a system that is sucking oxygen out from the air that is around them. So we have this system which people don't understand how it works. And that is the reason why I worry about Palestine. Because I can see Palestine is going to be liberated soon. Inshallah. Not Muslims say he depends on the South countries, etc. Forget about South countries. They are struggling, fighting among each other, right? Right? Zionism, inshallah, will be defeated because the American ordinary people now are fighting, right? The ordinary people of America now are fighting against the injustice, against their dollar money, tax money being used to keep babies in Gaza. So they are forcing. When Sunni Shia, the Google CEO, I can't remember now, Satya, he gave a speech at Stanford University. The students walk out, right? Because they are angry at the Google's involvement in the Nimbus project, which is providing cloud services to Israel. So the students and the ordinary people of America are fighting hard to make sure that they don't contribute to the genocide. So I don't see South countries or Muslim countries. We are talking about the ordinary people of America. The heartland of the imperialist power itself coming from, they are going to liberate. But what is going to happen after Palestine is liberated from the Zionists? That's what I worry most. Because I don't want to see Palestine just like South Africa. Liberated. But you see people hating each other, fighting each other. Because the system is there. The system is going to be there. And the system, the financial elites, they are using the Zionists to make more money for themselves. I told you the war is very expensive. So they make money from that because they finance the war and they make more money from that. And they see that, Zionism is not acceptable anymore soon. So they will abandon Zionism, but they will make sure that people who come after that, after independence, just like after Malaysia is independent, after whatever country is independent, the system is there, still there, preserved there, for them to make more money for themselves. That's what's going to happen. And that's how the history of imperialism, it was funded all the way by the financial elites. The first boat that went from Europe to the Americas, Columbus, was financed by the Bank of St. George, based in Genoa. It was already financed, right? 15th century, the financial elites were very smart already, cunning. They make sure that they change the way of how financial system works so that they can lend money without using the gold, by using the ledger system, those who study accounting. So you just use record, right? Allow people to overdraft. But there's no money behind it, there's no gold behind it, right? And so that's how it works. And then after a while, ending in 1971, gold is gone from the gold system. Now they can lend money as much as possible, and that's the reason why the debt is so huge. And people are working day and night to settle the debt, and they are making more money for themselves. That's how, and of course, in the meantime, they trap people. The Ottoman Empire was stupid enough, borrowed money from Western banks, and couldn't pay back, and they couldn't fight anymore because they were in debt. Such that when one of the sultans died, the Western banks say that I'm not going to release the body until you settle the debt of the sultan. Can you imagine that? How weak the Ottomans were, and countries after countries fell into the debt trap. They send scholars to teach us development studies, and the development model is borrow money to develop your country. And that was happened to African countries. In the end, they couldn't settle the debts. Became classified as HIPC, highly indebted poor countries cannot settle the debt. And then they cancel the debt. Now you can start borrowing again from the Western financial institutions, and they end up in the same trap, right? And it's made worse when the leaders are corrupt and racist, as we saw in Pakistan, in some other countries, where they fight against each other using borrowed money lent by the Western financial institutions, and they have to kowtow to the West because they need the money again in order to continue to operate as politicians. They need the money, so they have to listen. And the banks will lend them money, and the financial elites came out with schemes to make sure that they will never get into trouble if these people cannot pay back. They set up the International Monetary Fund, which will then settle the unpaid loans to the banks, and you listen to the IMF, which impose conditionalities. And the most important conditions is what? You must open your financial system to Western financial institutions to come and operate and lend money again for you businesses and for your government to borrow more. And that's how you become more entrapped and more entrapped. Which the Quran says, the Prophet asked us to make prayer. Pray to Allah to protect you from which is encirclement. Pray to Allah to protect you from being strangled by death and the power of man over you.
Sorry, Prof, I don't want to cut you, but we be on our time. Maybe you could summarize it.
Okay, summarize. And the last thing I want to say is what? The last thing is, if we are not aware of the danger of the debt industry in Islam, debt is very honorable. Lending money is very good because you are helping people who are poor. But the moment you make money from debt, What does Islam say? God says, Allah will wage war against you. Fa'tanu biharbin minallahi wa rasulih. With you, the moment you profit from that, God and His Prophet will declare war against you. Lend money to help others, but don't make money from that. Because once you make money from that, God will declare war against you. So your practice of that, of making it an industry, is going to destroy people. And this is what's happening now. It's an industry now, and if we are not aware of it, then we are going to be in trouble, right? Even though we think we are liberated. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prof. Nazari, for that insightful sharing regarding the debt-based economy. I would like to go straight to Prof. Jomo. I actually like to ask you about how international financial institution sustain the economic inequalities and also dependencies that persist globally right now. But I prefer that I ask you regarding what would be your response on the calls by Mark Rubio on the new Western century, as he mentioned in the Munich Security Forum, as he called for a unified Western effort to compete for the market in the global South. I think would that represent, Prof, a renewed form of economic imperialism? And what does that means for countries in the global South? Over to you, Prof.
Thank you very much, Dr. Badri. Assalamu alaikum to all. Let me emphasize that this Arabic greeting for peace is very timely for our times. I want to thank IAIS for hosting this meeting, Professor Nazari for initiating this effort, and Dr. Fadia for contributing as well. In response to Dr. Badri's question about Marco Rubio, I think it's important to recognize that Rubio probably represents the neocon tradition within the Trump regime now. The others may not be quite as neoconish, and this is important for those of you interested in the subtleties of U.S. foreign policy and imperialism. Rubio also, because he used to claim that he was a Cuban, that his parents ran away from Cuba, it turned out to be a lie, because his parents emigrated from Cuba to America years before the revolution in Cuba succeeded in 1959. Now in München, in Munich, Rubio told a new story. And his story is that he is part of a great Western tradition. And he went to München to mobilize the revival of this great Western tradition. And if you read his speech carefully, he's quite explicit that tradition is that of Western imperialism. So in a sense, it is very timely, Dr. Badri, that you relate it very explicitly to this theme. But for his idea of Western imperialism is about half a millennium old. It goes back to, although he doesn't say so, it goes back to Prince Enrique. Prince Enrique, the Portuguese prince who attacked Morocco in the beginning of the 15th century. And he is the hero. If you go to Lisbon, you can see statues to him and so on, Enrique. And just as a little footnote for Malaysians, when Magellan, in his Portuguese name is Magalhães, when Magalhães participated in the conquest of Malacca in 1511, he actually named the Malay slave he captured, he named him Enrique. It is a myth created by Cikgu Harun Minur Rashid to call him Panglima Awang. Okay, that's a myth. But the point is that this was how important Enrique was for the imperialist, the history of Western imperialism. He, in a sense, personally embodied marine imperialism, the expansion of the Western empires. But I think it's also important to recognize that Western imperialism today probably dates back only a couple of centuries. It is quite different from the earlier Western imperialisms, which were significantly different. The Iberian imperialisms of Spain and Portugal were essentially straightforward conquistador imperialism, including Malacca, as we know. But predating Malacca, Vasco da Gama famously, for example, went to India and conquered Goa and so on and so forth. And Albuquerque, from his base in India, led the attack on Malacca. And the interest was really in controlling strategic trade. And the most strategic thing at that time, of course, was spices. And this incredibly lasted centuries, right to the time of Raffles. When Raffles made his deal in Singapore, it was initially, the first deal was specifically for the right to process spices in Singapore. The spices would come from the Banda Islands, from Maluku, and they would be processed in Singapore to be sold. And Raffles, frankly, was not interested in Singapore. He was more interested in Java. He wrote about 700 pages full of illustrations and so on the history of Java. And the history of Java is not just a social or political or economic history. It is very importantly a natural history, which gives you some sense of how important the conquest of nature was from early imperialism. The access to minerals, the access to exotic plants, and so on and so forth. Now, I was not invited to speak about all that, but I think it's important to recognize that where there's imperialism, there's also anti-imperialism. And this anti-imperialism, at least for the modern period, does not begin with John Hobson or Vladimir Ilyich Lenin. It begins with people like Said Jamaluddin al-Afghani, who writes in the middle of the 19th century. People like Dadabhai Nauroji, who was who was a member of the English Parliament, an Indian from the English Parliament, who spoke up about so-called drain under colonialism from India to the West. So this is important to recognize, because this is about half a century before the Western recognition of this phenomenon called imperialism. But I think we also need to recognize that in this part of the world, our encounters with imperialism begin from the pre-colonial imperialism. And there was a man who was very influential in the West, a man named Joseph Schumpeter, Austrian originally, but who was the chairman of the economics department at Harvard, who wrote and said that under capitalism, imperialism will disappear. And he makes certain arguments about why imperialism is incompatible with capitalism. And this was directly in response to writings of people like Bukharin and Lenin at the end of the previous century. So Schumpeter's essay is in the 1920s. Bukharin and Lenin were arguing in 1910s. And it's important also to recognize that the famous pamphlet of Lenin is a very specific pamphlet. It's basically arguing against the Russian revolutionaries' nationalism. Don't identify with your Tsar to protect the old types of imperialism, because this is a period at the end of the 19th century, early 20th century, the end of the old type of Western imperialism. There was the end of the Austro-Hungarian Empire of the Catholics. There was the end of the Tsarist Empire in Russia. There was the end of the Ottoman Empire. And all this gave rise to nationalism. So you will see that the new imperialists were actually sponsoring nationalism, Arab nationalism, Jewish nationalism, in the form of the promise, Balfour's promise of the Israeli state, and so on and so forth. And of course Turkish nationalism as well. All this is emerging, sponsored, at least especially in the case of Arab nationalism, but sponsored primarily by the British. So the deal is made with Sharif Hussein, and so on. And of course, the colorful version, if you want, is to watch Lawrence of Arabia, and you get a sense of what was happening. So, one must recognize that imperialism can take many forms, many guises. It can be nationalist, it can be anti-nationalist, and so on and so forth at different times, as to serve its purpose. Now, the specific question raised by Dr. Badri in the first part of his question is how do we understand this system, which the international financial system which we have right now? I would simply say that the financial system basically emerges initially after World War II. Let's remember that at the height of British imperialism, at the end of the 19th century, early 20th century, that is also the beginning of the end. When Britain confidently, people like Churchill were relatively junior ministers, but they were ministers nonetheless, they go into World War II. World War I. They go into World War I, they think it's going to be wrapped up. Just, you remember somebody else did that recently? Somebody said that this thing will take a few days, right? Okay? And that's exactly what the British believed when they went into World War I. And of course, it lasted almost half a decade. And by the end of it, Britain was heavily indebted. Going back to the theme of Professor Nazari, heavily indebted. And what happened with World War II? Again, Britain, same Churchill, heroically defends the British Empire, but it's basically they go further into debt. And who do they borrow from? Wall Street. So they're heavily indebted. That is why when Britain had to decolonize after World War II, it gave up all of South Asia. It gave up India. Now, most of this part of the world was, as Dr. Fadia pointed out, colonized through India. The empress of India, the concept of India included Myanmar as well as Malaya. The Strait settlements came under the India office. Okay? And this is important for us to recognize. So the Strait settlements were part of this British Empire, and the Strait settlements was crucial. And so you could give up most of India, but over the course of the 20th century, Malaya had become extremely important. And during the first half decade after World War II, Malaya single-handedly contributed 70% of the foreign exchange earnings of the entire sterling area. Okay, the sterling area was the area where you use a currency which was the pound sterling. And that was basically contributed by Malaya. Okay, this is something is no great secret. Even the British admitted this, and so on and so forth. So you couldn't have independence in 1947, according to Dr. Fadia's story, because you can't, because this is the most important colony. Okay, and we have today significant public intellectuals in this country who deny we were ever colonized. I mean, it's no laughing matter when you are in such great delusions that you deny you were ever colonized, and you deny the hemorrhage which this caused you. So this is why precisely why discussions such as this are extremely important for us to not only think about the rest of the world, but also what it means for all of us. So Malaya basically is so important because during this period, the US gets involved with the Korean War, and the Korean War pushes up the price of tin, and it pushes up the price of rubber, and this is why Malaya was especially important. Okay, so and so so what happens in the British are basically, the story of British imperialism is beginning to end. But even after they win in 1945, there's still no self-consciousness. Okay? Winston Churchill gets voted out, Attlee comes in, so-called Labour Party government comes in, and you still do not have, because of the value, the incredible value of this part of the world. So 1946, 45, 46. So Dr. Fadia's story begins in 1945 because Dr. Burhanuddin and the Pekemam, the Malay Nationalist Party, demand independence right after the Japanese surrender. They demand independence. Okay. And that's a story which Dr. Fadia can tell you better than I can, so I won't get into all that. But I think it's important to recognize that in 1944, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who is no angel, by the way, Delano, his mother's maiden name, is the name of the #1 American family which made money from the opium trade to China. Okay, the #1 was the Delano family. The British, of course, Jardines was the most important. Jardine was the most important family in terms of, some of you might have worked with Jardine at some point in the past. You got nothing to do with this history, so But let us not forget, before they sold opium to China, they were also selling opium here. Okay, and some of the royal families in this country collapsed precisely because they got so involved with opium. Okay, so that's another story. Okay, and I won't get into that right now. But I think it's important. So basically, this period when the British are still dominant at one level internationally between World War I and the mid-50s. And this story appropriately ends. So in 1953, when Dr. Mossadegh is overthrown in Tehran, we often hear in contemporary accounts the role of Kermit Roosevelt, the grandson of Teddy Roosevelt. But in fact, his role was minor. Even though the British CIA was trying to get more involved, the major role, the major sponsor, proponent of the overthrow of Dr. Mossadegh was Anglo-Persian, now known as British Petroleum. Okay? And this is quite important. It's all quite well documented now. It's no secret, the role of MI6 and MI5 in overthrowing Dr. Mossadegh. So, but basically, the story still doesn't end here. The story ends, and it's very relevant to us today. The story ends in 1956, the invasion of Suez. And President Eisenhower is very angry because he's going for re-election. And the British and the French and the Israeli government invade Suez Canal without even telling him. So President Eisenhower basically says, get out, and they all withdraw. Okay? That is the moment that you know British imperialism is finished. And it takes a few more months before they announce withdrawal east of Suez. Okay? So what is left? You've given up South Asia. It's basically us here. Okay? So when we think about why we got independence in 1957, it's not accidental. The timing is all part of a larger narrative. The the forced withdrawal of the Europeans. So it's a quite a long story, and the story comes to the present in many interesting ways, involving other people in Southeast Asia, the father of the president, the current president of a neighboring country, and so on and so forth. But we won't get into all that right now because I've run out of time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Prof. Jomo. I think always insightful to hear from you. I think I'd like to inform that I think the audience that one of the most viewed podcasts is when we host Prof. Jomo in our podcast. I think a round of applause to Prof. Jomo again. I think so. I think I would like to allow for I think have 10 minutes, Prof. Nazari, for Q&A. So yeah, raise your hand and introduce yourself and be brief in your question. So yeah, gentlemen over there.
All right, thank you so much. I just have, I guess, two specific questions directed to Dr. Fadia. I think it's very insightful what you've explained about race as a colonial construct that has really shaped about how Malaysian society is today. I was just wondering, what would you give as a, like, if you were to write one passage or one paragraph or like just one sentence, what is your definition or working definition of race? If someone were to ask you, right, how would you condense it into one small utterance? And the second question for you is, you mentioned about how Islam is used to sort of like divide, right, between the Malays and non-Malays. Perhaps could you elaborate a bit more on that? I'm very, very interested to know the specifics of it. Yeah.
Kindly one question for one person because we would like to save on time. Sorry. I think, yes, that's a better approach that we gather the question. Prof, over to you.
Thank you. So my question is for Professor Nazari and Prof. Jomo. Given that, do we accept the idea that capitalism and imperialism are mutually constitutive of each other? And if that's the case, is it possible for any reform away from imperialism within the context of capitalism? And the other question is, does ASEAN have sufficient leverage in order to be an anti-imperialist force? Talking about economic, geopolitical leverage.
Thank you, Prof. We open for one more question for this round. Gentlemen, yeah.
My name is Fauzi. I just want to ask Prof. Jomo and Prof. Nazri, but my questions also relates to the previous panel. The thing is, I was fortunate to attend the public lecture by Professor Jeffrey Sack of Columbia University recently at Sunway University. And he argues, that the issue about the war, the Iranian war and all that, is basically against China, actually. And that is manifested through U.S. activities, in Venezuela, in Cuba, to control the Americas, so that, it won't be it will make it easier for America to spread east with the assistance of Israel, who is now going for greater Israel, so that Israel expansion towards greater Israel is act as a buffer against China. I wonder whether this is true, really. Thank you.
To respond to the first question about race, I would define it as race as a structure that defines and divides, because division is necessary for domination. So when race is used to divide people, to allow or to justify preferential treatment, then that would obstruct the possibility of unity that is needed to challenge and also dismantle oppressive systems of domination. And the second question is about religion. Could you please repeat the question?
It was just a basic, because you mentioned that Islam was used to divide Malay and the non-Malay, right? Something about Malay-Muslim interests. Could you perhaps like elaborate on the specifics of how that worked?
Yeah, I think when we talk about Islam, we cannot not talk about Malayness or the racial category that comes with Malayness, which is Malay ataupun Melayu. So it's very interesting. Under the People's Constitution, Section 2 of the People's Constitution actually provides that definition for citizenship, which also encompasses nationality. And that citizenship is called the Melayu citizenship, and it does not carry any religious implications. That means at the time, if you are a Malayan citizen, you are considered a Melayu citizen, but your religion has nothing to do with the entitlements and also the rights and freedoms that come with that citizenship and also nationality. But now, when you look at the definition of Islam under the constitution that we have, that was also embedded in the Malayan constitution, we see how the term Malay as a racial category is strictly defined. You have to be Muslim and you have to practice Muslim culture or Malay custom. So being Muslim and also being Malay are somehow inseparable under the current constitution. And that restricts this idea of Islam that is inclusive, the idea of Islam that cannot be separated from the history of Islam that came before colonialism. So when we look at Islam as it is defined today, it is very restraining in that sense, right? It's very constricting. And that erases the history of Islam that came, where the people at the time, they appreciated diversity and plurality. Islam, again, is not a dogma, just like frameworks that were adopted by the National Liberation Movement at the time to clarify all these issues confronting a heavily racialized society. Because Islam came to indigenize local populations. So they don't come and say, oh, everyone has to be Arab. Everyone has to practice Islam in a certain way. But that's what the constitution today says. If you are Malay, you have to be Muslim. And also you are required to practice in a certain manner. You can't even be Shia in this country because it's considered deviant to be Shia in Malaysia. But again, that's why Islam, I think it's very important for us to look at the history of Islam before colonialism, during colonialism, and how the political actors that were fighting for true independence for Malaya articulated the idea of Islam that is liberatory, the idea of Islam that is inclusive, the idea of Islam that is free from colonial distortion and definition.
Okay, let me respond to what said Farid. Now, a question about capitalism and imperialism, they are they intertwined? I want to rename capitalism because capital, if you are a capitalist, and during the time of Islam, the time of Prophet, there were many capitalists who had capital, who did business using capital. That is why the famous historian, German British historian who wrote a book, Islam and Early Capitalism, he said the founder of capitalism is Prophet Muhammad. He said the founder of capitalism is not Adam Smith. It was way before the time of the Prophet. They were practicing that, meaning business, capital, etc., etc. I pointed out to him that is very, very misleading because during the time of the Prophet, there was one industry that was not in existence at that time, which characterized modern day capitalism, which is the banking industry, because it is against Islam to practice riba, whereas riba is at the heart of capitalism now. So when we talk about capitalism, it can be misunderstood. I would say riba and the debt industry and imperialism, they are together. Because they were the one who financed imperialist expansion. All the expedition, all the wars and all the colonization activities that came in Africa, Asia, in North America, they were financed by the banking groups, by the Western bankers. They were instigating them because they could see they can make more money. When the market expanded all the way around globally, they could see they can make more money. They were the one behind. And when borrowers cannot pay, then they will make sure that this so wealthy class financiers, then they will then ask the government to wage war to make sure that these indebted colonies will be able to pay back. So they were at the heart of it. They were intertwined. So, and you can see countries that originally were the fighters against injustice. Once they get entrapped into this, then that's it. They are gone. Sudan is the best example with the 3 laws. La, I don't know in Arabic, no to normalization, no to this, no to that, 3 laws. And then in the end, they say, okay, we agree to recognize Israel. Why? Why? Because they were indebted. They couldn't pay their debts. Because when they started fighting against each other, trying to control their country, they borrowed money from the Western financial lenders. And when they couldn't pay back, that guy, Pompeo, what's his name? I can't remember his first name, but he's Secretary of State for something Pompeo. Mike Pompeo flew to Khartoum, spoke to the leader of Sudan. We can help you restructure your debt if you recognize Israel. Because we know you can't pay your debt. You're in trouble now. You need money. We can help you. We take you out of the terrorist list of countries, right? Sponsor of terrorism. And then you can have access to funds and we can restructure your debt. That's why Sudan now has finished, right? And why is it Malaysia dare not stop companies like Amazon Web Services, Caterpillar, from operating in this country, from PNB and Amanah Nation or whatever, right? We are very scared. Why? Because the moment you try to upset the Americans, then we are indebted countries. Malaysian public debt is already more than 1 trillion. Household debt is more than about 1.5 trillion. The moment the economy is a bit unstable, everybody will complain because they cannot pay their cars loans, they cannot pay their housing loans, everybody gets angry. So a country which is living in debt can be easily twisted, can be easily be put by their nose. Listen to us. Don't create trouble because you are going to lose your political power because economy goes down, everybody get angry, you lose your power. So listen to us. So this is the reason why, so I'm coming back to the question just now is, I would say subjugation and control of people around the world, right, either individually or in terms of nation, is actually easily achieved once they are entrapped into by the debt industry, by the financial industry. And that's why we need to make people understand and have not only understand the system, but also lead a life, a way of life, which prevent us from falling into the trap. Thank you.
Thank you. If I may make a remark on the question posed to Dr. Fadia, most people in Malaysia are either in denial or don't know that the first person to say I'm a proud member of the Malay race was actually not a Malaysian and not an Indonesian either. He was actually Jose Rizal before he was executed by the Spanish in the end of the 19th century. But anyway, that's, yeah. Professor Farid raises the important question of the relationship between capitalism and imperialism. Unfortunately, I cannot give him a straight answer because it all depends on how one understands and defines capitalism as well as imperialism. There was a man named Andre Gunder Frank who wrote a book maybe about 25, 30 years ago, where he argued that that capitalism has existed for 5,000 years. So with that kind of broad understanding of capitalism, and then the same problem arises with imperialism. How does one understand imperialism? So a lot of it depends on how one relates the two. But the question came into sharp focus because of Schumpeter. And that's why I mentioned Schumpeter, who basically said that imperialism is incompatible with capitalism. And in some ways, his argument is really about the kind of imperialism of the different powers, different pre-capitalist powers. And in that sense, by definition, his argument is tautological, but perhaps correct. The other related question is, can ASEAN be anti-imperialist? I think there was a moment when it could have been, and that was 1973, when Tun Razak, Adam Malik, and Rajaratnam agreed to ZOPFAN. So ASEAN is created in 1967, and ZOPFAN is declared in 1973 to create a zone of peace, freedom, and neutrality. Okay, so I think at that moment, if we all took that commitment seriously, I think the potential would be there. Not stridently anti-imperialist, but certainly, at least non-aligned. That has been compromised very severely. As we know, there are military bases just south of Malaysia. There are military facilities. In fact, Malaysia offered Lumut to the U.S. Navy during Tun Mahathir's time. Lumut was offered for facilities, but I don't know how much it has been used. It has been used a little, none at all, but it has been used. And of course, we know that after winning election, Ferdinand Marcos Jr. Became president of the Philippines, and he basically has authorized 4 new military bases. So now there are 11 military bases in the Philippines, and the 4 new ones are all facing China and Taiwan. Okay, so right in northern Luzon. And more recently, within the last couple of months, the Indonesia has announced that overflight facilities have been given to the USAF, the United States Air Force, from its bases in Australia and so on, over Indonesia to go to wherever they want to go. Okay? So we now have 3 countries who are basically strategic and military allies of the US. So it's very difficult to be even non-aligned, let alone anti-imperialist. So I think that is a very important reminder. The question is a very important reminder of the potential and the limitations of ASEAN. Now, because of the specific history of Timor-Leste, there is a particular its new membership of ASEAN introduced a certain potential, but I think it's also important to remind us that one of the ASEAN member countries was stridently opposed to Timor-Leste's membership of ASEAN, and it was only overcome with some difficulty, and now it is Timor-Leste is a member of ASEAN. And Jose Ramos Horta is a frequent visitor to Malaysia and has a fairly strong relationship with the regime here. Now, the last question Cik Fauzi raised is about whether or not I think the Jeffrey Sachs observation is actually not new. The one who decisively changed the strategic orientation of U.S. foreign policy was actually Obama under the influence of Hillary Clinton. Now, one should remember that Bill Clinton allowed the US to become, allowed China to become a member of the WTO in the year 2000. Okay, and that was very important. And then Vietnam became a member of the of WTO in 2003, against resistance from the US establishment. Now, the view at that time by people like Clinton was that trade liberalization would strengthen imperialism rather than weaken imperialism. But when you are an imperialist power on the decline, your view of the world changes, and this is precisely why the turn of Obama, which has now been caricatured by Trump 2.0 especially, is quite important. But it's also interesting that in the recent visit by President Trump to Beijing, you find that he doesn't have his usual bluster, okay, and it's a very humble, a very rare, almost counterintuitive, appearance in Beijing. But it basically reminds us that as far as his view of the world and the view of the world from Washington, perhaps, it is only big power which count, which basically incentivizes country, sort of middle powers, including Iran and so on, that you're not going to take us seriously unless you have nuclear arms. So Kim Jong-il, for example, he was taken very seriously. There were meetings here in Singapore and so on between between Trump and Trump 1.0. And this is a very dangerous attitude to have, because you're basically telling all the middle powers nuclearize or face bullying, continued bullying. It's very important also to recognize that so-called middle powers can change the world in very important ways. Look at what has happened over the last few months with Iran, Hormuz, and what has happened in the world. So many things have changed in the last few months. So, and if you look, for example, at Cuba, at the end of the 1980s, Cuba basically created the conditions for the liberation of South Africa. The end of apartheid was only made possible because Cuba was able to hold its ground and arguably defeat the South African forces who were in Namibia and so on, and southern Angola. So it is very important to recognize that small acts of resistance, and this of course is big for Cuba, big for Iran, okay? But these kinds of acts of resistance can have huge implications well beyond the immediate issues at stake. And this, I think, is very important for us to recognize. But one should also recognize that there are very few countries left in the world who are prepared to make the kind of sacrifice which Cuba has made, which Iran has made, and so on and so forth. So we have to recognize this and recognize also that this is why it is all the more urgent to rebuild the non-aligned movement on a new basis, on the basis of not only of pacifism, but also on the basis of a renewed multilateralism, and I would say also development and justice. A commitment to the sustainable development goals, for example, as flawed as it is, but the end of the kind of bullying which we have seen with the flagrant violation of all the norms of multilateralism. So I think this is why I really appreciate the initiative you all have taken to organize this event today, and all of you for your interest. And I hope we will continue to strive to create a better world for all. Thank you.
Yeah, Dr. Badri, just I don't want to take credit for organizing this. Actually, the initial idea came from Mr. Tong. Mr. Tong from Aliran, he was the one who suggested to me to organize this. Thank you very much, Mr. Tong.
Thank you. So I think we need to end our session today. I think it's already lunchtime. I think I would like to thank all the panelists for your readiness to share with us your insightful thought. So I'll give back to the Mr. Chairperson. Over to you.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Ahmad Badri and the panelists. So we would like to have everyone remain there. First, we would like to get Professor Nazari from Hashim Sani Center to hand some gifts to our two panelists. To Dr. Faldia and Professor Jomo. Okay, now it's another session from IAIS. We would like to invite Dr. Syed Azman, the CEO of IAIS, to hand over the gift to the panelists. More gifts. Maybe because Dr. Faldia is here. Dr. Faldia. Next is Professor Jomo. Next is Professor Dr. Nazari. And from the first session, if we could invite Her Excellency Hernandez. This is from the host. Dr. Muslim Imran. And finally, Mr. Tong. If you could get everyone together for a group photo. Thank you to everyone. Yes, we would like to announce that we have lunch, but before everyone leaves, we would like to announce, inshallah, this November, we will have the 5th International Conference on Palestine Studies, organized by Hashim Sani Center for Palestine Studies and also IAIS. So do check Hashim Sani Center for Palestine Studies Facebook to know more information. So thank you, everyone. We would like to invite everyone to have